You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
And now, the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 2nd, live. Well, here we are on the second day of July. Two tropical systems active, or remnants of them per se. Tropical Storm Elsa still barely in the main development region, will be crossing to the Caribbean soon. And the remnants of Raoni, which are still persisting in the South Atlantic. 38 storms have formed so far this year as of today. Here we are on day 32 of the hurricane season in the Atlantic. Elsa there should be crossing to the Caribbean Sea during the next 24 hours. We also have a 10% chance of formation right behind Elsa with that wave there. Not many models are predicting development with that at this time. It's day 48 of hurricane season for the Eastern Pacific. Really nothing going on after Enrique there. It is expected to remain quiet there for the next 5 days. 5 tropical storms have formed there in that basin so far this season. In the Western Pacific, chances for 95W have pretty much dropped to 0, although we do have a new AOI that we brought up yesterday, that Philippine Sea AOI. We're now giving that a 20% chance of development as it passes pretty much in between the Philippines and Taiwan in the next 5 days. In the North Indian Ocean, not really much going on there. It is, of course, that gap between the season, as we usually mention. Only thing that you usually see in July in this basin are maybe monsoonal depressions. Nothing really much that is expected to go on this month, so nothing really anytime soon there. Here's the Atlantic. You can clearly see Elsa there, pretty much the northeast of South America, those South American countries there. It is booking it at a really quick pace. It's been going at around 25 to 30 miles an hour over the last 12 to 24 hours, and it's expected to maintain that pace for right now. In the Eastern Pacific, there's literally absolutely no evidence of Enrique's existence at this point on this type of satellite imagery. And of course, really nothing that is expected to go on. And as you can tell, in the Central Pacific, there's still clearly nothing going on there as well. With the Western Pacific, it's pretty much a mess going on over there right now. I can't really see the thing that's going to become that 20% AOI quite clearly yet. It's right in that mess of clouds towards the bottom of your screen there. 95W can also hardly trace, considering the fact that yesterday's its center was completely exposed, so it really had no chances of formation from the get-go. It was really going to be late, and it does not look like any development will be going on with that system at all. Here it is in the North Indian Ocean. It is looking like the same monsoonal mess that it's been doing for the last few weeks in the Bay of Bengal. Arabian Sea looking quite clear as usual. We are in that gap, so really nothing expected to form there soon. Here's the latest on Tropical Storm Elsa in terms of that satellite imagery. It's starting to get a little bit more organized. It's been trying to get there, although it's been moving at a really fast pace. Some strengthening is anticipated, and we do think it could become a hurricane in the next 5 days before it does pass south of Haiti and possibly strike Jamaica and Cuba. Here are the sea surface temperatures ahead of really the Eastern Pacific. Nothing really as of the next 5 days, but it's not exactly the warmest there either. 27 to 28 degrees Celsius, although those temperatures do not extend very far. In the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, it's looking pretty warm, 26 to 27 there. Same thing with the main development region. So we're starting to get those warmer temps there, so it'll be interesting to see what goes on there. The Gulf Stream also very supportive with those 27 degrees Celsius as well. North Indian Ocean, we're still looking at 28 degrees Celsius temperatures for the majority of the basin, although of course really nothing is going to be forming there due to the environmental conditions not supporting such. Western Pacific, we're still got the giant blob of 30 degrees Celsius waters that is really present in the Philippine Sea, and of course in the southern hemisphere it remains winter there, so nothing going on there at this time, and really nothing that is expected to go on anytime there soon. Plain and simply just because the waters are just not conducive for it. Here are the sea surface temperature anomalies. We're looking at that cold spell continuing across the California region all the way south of Hawaii. The Eastern Pacific is just cold and cooler than normal in general. Atlantic, the subtropics, and the main development region continue to be warmer than average. And of course, same story in the Western Pacific. And here with our live team today, we have Ethan, Dakota, Noah, and Wyatt. How are y'all doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Okay.
Myself.
So we have our streams squared off, and starting with Ethan's stream. That is the latest on Tropical Storm Elsa, and I think that would be what type of imagery you're presenting to us, so that way people get an idea of what we're doing.
This is the sandwich RGB type imagery right here of Elsa, and you'll notice that it had this burst of convection on the north side of the circulation. It's hard to I don't know where the center is on this imagery, but I guess it's somewhere under here. It's hard to tell simply because this type of imagery is following the storm, but if I had to guess, this new burst that has just happened has actually covered up the center, it would appear. So it does appear that the storm has, for now, fended off itself from dry air just fine. And we'll have to wait and see what the storm does from now, just from here on in. But it does appear that the storm is intensifying, and I would say that a hurricane strike to portions of the Windward Islands, which you can see popping up, is not out of the question just yet.
Interesting. Dakota, what are your thoughts on what we have with Elsa currently?
Well, I'm thinking this could be this is turning out to be a very concerning situation sometime soon. Definitely keep an eye on it once it enters the Caribbean.
And Noah, you're here with us as well. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, when I looked earlier today, I thought it looked absolutely terrible with the exposed low-level center. Has done a pretty good job at sustaining new convection and firing new convection, which is pretty concerning. Looking at, we now have the time of the day diurnal minimum, where we actually have naturally the least amount of convection. And it's a pretty good sign that the tropical cyclone is intensifying when you have deep bursts of convection right at that time. So I think we're certainly looking at a strengthening storm, and maybe even at a storm that is strengthening at a pretty fast pace.
Now, Ethan has the National Hurricane Center's latest cone. Would you like to explain what's going on with that?
Sure. Just want to go ahead and just say, new off of top of this hour, Tropical Storm Watch has been issued for, you can see, for the southwestern portion of the Dominican Republic, as well as for Jamaica. So we've had new watches come out for the system, and I imagine we'll be seeing Cuba follow either tonight or tomorrow morning, and perhaps we'll also see this Tropical Storm Watch down here. I'm not sure what this island's called. I'm sure that someone can grab that for me. I'm just going to look up the latest watches and warnings. That's Grenada, looks like. I imagine we'll probably see a tropical storm watch for upgraded to a tropical storm warning for those locations. But regarding this National Hurricane Center forecast, it's very interesting on the intensity side of things, because you've got this 12-hour point right here. First off, the remarkable track agreement for the system, at least until you get up to Cuba, is pretty good. But this 12-hour point is actually with winds of 50 miles per hour, and then going on from 24 hours all the way up to 120, from basically the Windward Islands, west of the Windward Islands, all the way up to Florida. The National Hurricane Center keeps us with winds of 60 miles per hour, which is very interesting to say because if we look at the models, you'll actually see that the GFS, HWRF, and the HMON all bring this up towards hurricane. HMON is actually almost going major, and HWRF actually almost goes Cat 4. Um, but if I had to forecast a peak for the system right now, I'd probably actually stick with what I did last night. I'd actually probably run with 80 miles per hour as of right now for this storm. Um, but where it's hard to say because there's a lot of uncertainty with this storm. We know what it's going to do once in the eastern Caribbean Sea, but when it gets near Cuba, near Jamaica, and on up towards Florida, and maybe even getting up towards portions of the East Coast, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of numbers and models to crunch over the next few days. And the storm could still go westward and to go towards Texas or Louisiana. We don't know at this point.
And what I've noticed with the National Hurricane Center's latest forecast, they are really interesting with the fact that pretty much after 24 hours, it just remains 60 miles an hour through the entire forecast period, pretty much 60 for 4 days straight. And the only time I recall seeing that many of the same number was back when we had Tropical Storm Theta of last year, and they had 60 miles an hour for all 5 days. So it really goes to show how uncertain this forecast is, given the fact that that's usually what the National Hurricane Center does when a forecast is so uncertain. They usually stagnate this. We saw that with Laurel too. They had it with 50 for a while as it crossed through the Caribbean as well.
Absolutely, and that's just what we gotta look at the discussion for, because this is why the NHC, this is why this product exists, so the NHC can let the general public know what they're thinking. So you'll see that they are saying, I'll just read off the discussion right here. The intensity forecast and its high uncertainty are also a little changed from the last advisory. Some strengthening is expected during the next day or so, as Elsa is expected to be in an environment of warm to surface temperatures, light vertical wind shear, and high mid-level relative humidity. What does that mean? Those conditions overall are just pretty favorable for a strengthening tropical cyclone. However, as mentioned earlier, the fast forward motion could result in the upper and lower parts of the storm being unable to stay together, and this could limit strengthening. The latter part of the intensity forecast also has the issues of possible land interaction and disagreements along the global models on how favorable the upper level winds will be, although the latest model runs trended towards less favorable conditions north of about 22 degrees north. This uncertainty is highlighted by the UK Met forecasting Elsa to weaken to a trough near western Cuba, while the GFS forecasts it to be a hurricane in the same area at the exact same time. Based on these factors, the National Hurricane Center intensity forecast continues to be on the lower end of the intensity guidance suite. So that's what the NHC is thinking, and I'm sure I can grab our latest forecast cone here. I'm not sure when we'll be having a new one, but I know that we did forecast a hurricane out of this. And as a matter of fact, let me just grab this cone real quick right here. We are forecasting what appears to be a 85 mile an hour peak, so that's gone up from our latest cone. That cone is now being shown on your screen. You can see that we are forecasting an 85 mile an hour peak around just east of Jamaica, with an 80 mile an hour landfall being forecasted there as well. It does appear that's also for Cuba as well, with a general weakening trend as it goes up towards Florida.
Indeed. Wyatt, you're also here with us. What are your latest thoughts? Because we did skip you so we could get to the cone. But what are your thoughts on this system right now?
It definitely is improving over the course of the day. I am streaming something. If you pull that up, that is the Dvorak enhanced loop. So what this basically is, you can better see features such as central dense overcast and banding features and stuff. What appears to have happened is a large convective burst has sustained itself and grown over the center as it progresses west-northwest. It also looks like that it could be forming into a small central dense overcast in that area. It also should be noted that there are some banding features to the south and southeast of this potential CDO. And also something I want to point out, the water vapor loop, once this loads, you can see that there is a little bit of dry air to the northwest of the system, and that Elsa was struggling with that earlier today. You could see that some of the darker colors were getting wrapped into the core of the system. However, recent convective bursts have kind of created this moist envelope in the dry air region. So the dry air is being mixed out, it appears right now, and the system might have the ability to maintain itself or even intensify slightly as it continues pushing towards the Lesser Antilles.
And of course, that is what the National Hurricane Center is expecting, given the fact that they do have this at 50 miles an hour within the next 12 hours, and then within 24 hours it should be at 60. That is their latest code that they're going with, and then that's when the intensity, of course, becomes very uncertain. Leahy, I see you've joined us. Well, what are your thoughts on this, if you're here?
Yeah, definitely a very, very interesting storm that we have going on here. This is only, I believe, the second tropical storm to form this far east, like I think east of 50 West, I believe. It's only the second so early in the year. The other one would have been the Trinidad hurricane of 1933. So it's definitely already an unprecedented storm, and hopefully it doesn't get too strong as it heads into the Caribbean.
Yep, especially considering the fact that this year is already giving people thoughts of whether this is 2020 again all over. Especially given the fact that we literally broke the record for the earliest fifth storm on record. The previous record was Edward, and that was in 2020. And that did not get named until July 6th. So, that is not good news for anyone, I'm sure, because we do not need as active as a season. I personally don't think that we're going to get as active as last year. I'm hoping that there is a break in the tropics after this. Hopefully that does become the case, because we do not need any more of those big hurricanes, especially with the fact that we've seen so many strong tropical waves coming off in the month of June. And 2020 really didn't have that much of a strong tropical wave signature this early in the season. Of course, you didn't get the first MDR system in general forming until Gonzalo, and that was in the second half of May, or July. Wow. Yeah, we're really in an active start, considering the fact that, of course, we already tied the record for the most June systems with 3. So, I mean, that really doesn't give us an clear identification as to how active this year is going to be, because you had another year that had 3 June systems. For example, 1968. That turned out to be a very inactive season. So, you really can't say how active this season is going to be yet. Although you can get a hint with Elsa, because that could provide some clues as to what we could be dealing with as we head into the later portion of the season. What are y'all thoughts on that?
Well, it has been shown before that early season activity doesn't necessarily lend itself to late season activity. What I can tell you is that this season so far, at least tropically, around the globe really, has behaved very similarly to a hyperactive season, 2004. We've had an extremely active South Atlantic, just like 2004. We had a very strong typhoon over in the West Pacific very early on in the year, just like 2004. And we've also had some very strong cyclones in the southern hemisphere as well, outside of the Atlantic, also in the South Pacific and Southwest Indian Ocean. We saw Cat 5s in each of those. And 2004 also featured some very strong cyclones down there. So, I mean, if you really want to press that button, we're definitely taking a look at another very active season. as far as what this storm's potential is. It's really going to depend on if this storm is able to slow down. The biggest thing, right? The biggest problem with this storm is that it's moving at a currently ridiculous 28 miles an hour. That's 28 miles an hour of wind shear that the storm has to deal with. Storms don't like 28 knots of wind shear, nor 28 miles an hour. Storms do not like that at all. And you can really see when you take a look at scatterometer data that this storm is just, it's got good winds to it. I don't want to say that the storm is struggling because it's certainly a healthy storm, especially for how fast it's moving. It's a very healthy storm. It's just, it's got similar problems to other fast moving tropical waves and tropical storms that have formed while moving at 20, 30 miles an hour out here in the MDR, where it's struggling to close off one of its quadrants. It's getting really affected by self-inflicted shear. Usually there's also a dry air component to that as well, and we're seeing that because typically these fast-moving systems are relatively close to a very strong ridge to the north of it. We've got that. So tons of factors at play right now. One thing I do have to say is that it does look like that the storm is going to slow down as it heads towards the Caribbean. And as the storm starts to slow down, you're going to start to see the storm better organized. I think the biggest question is how is this storm going to fare with Hispaniola? That's always the big question with any of these storms. Now, we know in 2020, storms didn't care about Hispaniola. Isaias did a center reformation, didn't even pass over the island, became hurricane. And Laura, it passed to the south of Hispaniola, used the mountains with frictional convergence, and also intensified rather than going over the mountains and it having be a detriment to the cyclone. So it's always hit or miss whenever one of these fast-moving storms ends up colliding with this island that has a lot of tall mountains on it. I think that once it gets towards Hispaniola here, we're really going to see what the impacts are going to look like for the U.S., for Cuba, for Jamaica, because that's really going to tell us just how strong this storm could potentially be.
Yeah, definitely a lot of, if this doesn't really be affected by those land barriers, we could be looking at a pretty potential problem there, especially for parts of Cuba, especially, and maybe even the U.S. when it comes to that. I know models have been completely confused as to what will happen because there's really a considerable amount of factors into play here. I think the main factor right now that will be steering this is a cold front. If it's weaker, which the GFS displays, then it looks like it will be going towards the Gulf Coast with a weaker turn. And then if the cold front is stronger, then will do dealing with a sharper turn, and then it will be going up the eastern seaboard. So, well, not exactly eastern seaboard. At the very least, the Florida and southeast. But of course, we are still too far out to determine that. I don't know if anyone has models that want to be shown.
Basically, model spread after 2.5 days is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of that has to do with Hispaniola. Because if this storm's able to maintain its core over Hispaniola, there's a good chance that this thing's just not going to care and it's going to keep on going west. But if Hispaniola is able to significantly affect the system and actually pull the system north, then, that's going to lead to an entirely different storm where instead of it passing to the south of Cuba, now we'll be talking about a storm passing to the north of Cuba. That will likely drive the storm further east as per the ECMWF. We'll have to just see. I really think that Hispaniola, the interaction with Hispaniola is really going to be the tell-all as to what this storm ends up doing going forward.
Wyatt, you have the model track guidance. What do you see from this?
Not the operational models of each kind. These are interpolated, so they could vary slightly, but I mean they are generally in the same direction that before Hispaniola, it's an extremely tight. It almost looks like a single line at the very beginning. That is going to go south of Barbados, and then it's going to end up somewhere in the Caribbean. However, there is some uncertainty as to whether or not it will end up closer to Hispaniola or further south. And then once we end up knowing this about on Saturday afternoon, I think we'll have more information as to whether if it will go this more that way or more that way. And as Devin was saying, there are significant differences in major models, with the GFS being further to the west, and then the European going further to the east. Another good thing to look at are the GEFS ensembles. You could see the considerable spread in the ensembles after Hispaniola. Several of them take it over Hispaniola, potentially into the Bahamas and off the east coast, and about another half take it somewhere into the Gulf of Mexico, potentially as far as southeastern Louisiana on this particular run. So it is definitely something to keep an eye on. I would say if you are pretty much west of 90 degrees west, there is some potential for impacts kind of in this region here.
Yeah, so that's again, and that, like you said, the model spread, it significantly spreads out after Hispaniola, because that is such a wild card. These models don't necessarily know how that land interaction is going to end up happening. And it's always a big question mark whenever one of these storms ends up going near that island. For all we know, it could approach that island and just fall apart. We've seen it happen before, where we'll get good 50, 60 mile an hour tropical storms enter into the Caribbean. They get close to that island, and they either just fall apart into a trough before they even get there, or the storm just gets affected by heavy shear and it becomes a naked low and then just dies. Or the storm just gets pulled directly over the island and just becomes a disheveled mess as it moves to the north. But we've also seen an equal amount of storms that just ignore the island and just keep on going on in its merry way, and then actually intensify in that region between Hispaniola, Jamaica, and Cuba. We actually saw something very similar to that with an analog to the storm, Dennis of 2005. So it's really a wild game, and yeah, I'm not surprised to see that model guidance is abnormally spread out. Like, usually when you take about a 5-day error margin, you're talking about roughly 250 miles. With model spread, you typically don't see it, at least with ensemble spread, you typically don't see it more than 300 miles, 5 days. We're talking the model spread is almost 800 miles at day 5. It's an incredible, there's just incredible uncertainty with this system right now, which is why I really kind of don't feel confident about talking about U.S. impacts at all, because it's a complete question mark. We don't even know if this storm's going to hit the U.S. We honestly don't. It could. It definitely could. And you don't want to be unprepared for this storm, because it could impact the U.S. in 5 days, but it's not a guarantee.
Correct. Several of the ensembles that I was showing earlier do have the system going over the island of Cuba as well. That could also cause some disruption with the core of the system. However, if it misses Hispaniola and then gets to Cuba, I would think it would have the opportunity to potentially be a slightly stronger than if it were to just go to Hispaniola. But once it moves over Cuba, the very tall mountains of the island will likely cause some weakening. And then beyond that, it's just a question mark on both track and intensity, and if it even gets that far.
Historically, Cuba hasn't really downed the intensity of tropical cyclones very much. maybe a category at most, but Cuba
Right.
typically doesn't disshuffle tropical cyclones like Hispaniola historically has, where you'll get a pretty organized tropical storm or even hurricane. It slams into the island and it's just gone. So you don't really see that with Cuba. They'll weaken a little bit, but the Cuba effects would be far, far less than the effects from Hispaniola.
Right. The only reason I point out potential weakening, though, is if you notice with the ensembles, it looks like it could track from southeastern Cuba and then potentially stay overland for a long time over Cuba. So that could be different than if it were to just like cross Cuba perpendicularly.
Alright, I'm about to switch it over to Ethan. He's got the models that are displayed. Give me a second. Alright, there we go. And what are you seeing from the latest runs, Ethan?
Sure, Xavier. This is the latest GFS run right now that we're seeing. You can very clearly see Elsa there, pictured to the east of the Windward Islands right now. Just putting it into motion real quick. You can see GFS keeps it a little bit on the weaker side of things, 987 millibars as it passes through those islands. Then it weakens on down to strengthens, I should say, down to 990 millibars, which is I'd say strong tropical storm to weak hurricane maybe. And then it sort of maintains its intensity as it moves through north of Jamaica, south of Cuba, goes into Cuba. It looks to be as a minimal hurricane actually. That's 989 millibars there, and it really gains some intensity as it nears Florida. 980 millibars there. That's classic Category 1 pressure. That it seems to make landfall near Tampa, moving over Tampa there, and then it's out towards the eastern seaboard later down the run, really weakening as it passes through, and then turns extropical and pushes into Canada. And then by July 10th, it's all gone. Moving over to the CMC run. This was as of 12Z today. As it loads, you can see there's Elsa. Really keeps it again weak as it pushes through the islands. There's a lot of uncertainty still regarding Elsa, as Wyatt and Devin were just stating. Keeps it rather weak as it passes over Cuba, into southern Florida, up the Florida Peninsula, and then pushes through the East Coast. And I did note that the previous CMC runs were also predicting potentially a possible hurricane south of New England. So I wouldn't even that being happening there, but that since has passed. Now the Euro is something to be interesting about. If it'll load, you can see there's Elsa right there. Moves through the Windward Islands, and then it goes into the juggernaut of the Dominican Republic, and then it's just gone by the time it pushes out towards the East Coast. So this is probably the best case scenario for the U.S., but it would certainly give possibly a tropical storm strike to the Dominican Republic. We'll have to just wait and see if that scenario comes out to play. But regarding the ensemble runs for the GFS right now, each individual ensemble run right now, there's a lot of situations regarding the storm. They're still very close knit for the next 2 days on the storm regarding track. But as we keep saying, once we get near Hispaniola, Jamaica, and Cuba, there's a lot of differences that come. You can see some ensemble runs taking it through the Yucatan Strait, some into Florida, and some even near the Bahamas. Even there's a lot of situations that are possible regarding the storm. And you can even see potentially a second wave enter the Caribbean Sea and potentially development more on that. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But regarding Elsa, I'd say probably a strike anywhere from Louisiana up to maybe Boston even is possible.
Yeah, just adding on to the giant uncertainty as to where this could be going. A lot of places in play, so regardless, I would say don't focus on whether you're going to get hit or not. I'd really just be focusing on monitoring Elsa at this point, although if you're in the Caribbean you should be preparing, as of course we do have more tropical storm watches and warnings that have been issued. So if you are under a tropical storm watch and watching from the Caribbean, please be sure that you are prepared for Elsa. those in the U.S. watching and living in a coastal area or slightly inland, my best thing I can say to you is just watch this. We cannot say that it's going to hit you. We really don't have a good idea as to whether this is going to hit or not. Just
Yeah,
based,
nobody does.
yeah, there's just a giant uncertainty that is completely abnormal, and we're really not going to get a good grip on this for another few days. So, we really need.
We just received some information. Sorry to interrupt there, Xavier, but we've just received a ASCAP pass of Elsa, and it'll be interesting to note that if you look at this color scale down here and you look at the wind barbs in the storm, those are 45 knot wind barbs in the northern side of the storm.
Yeah, but that's a website that uses an algorithm that messes with the wind barbs, and that might not be accurate. That website does post-processing with the ASCAP winds, so it's entirely possible that the algorithm could have erroneously inflated one of the barbs to 45 knots. So that's not a guarantee yet, but it is possible. I'll have to wait for the unedited data to come through.
I'm also noticing, Devin, that the ATCF has also increased this to 50 miles per hour. Do you think that the National Hurricane Center will run with that at the 11 p.m. advisory?
If the ATCF does it, National Hurricane Center will almost certainly do it. They pretty much follow each other hand in hand, and and if they're really going to go with this 45 knot barb, which maybe that's valid. Like I said, I'll have to look at the untampered scan of it, because that algorithm is that I don't ever trust that. I don't trust that website. But yeah, if the ATCF is going 45 knot and National Hurricane Center, you can pretty much take it to the bank that they're going to go with whatever the ATCF is going with.
If you do have any comments or questions, you can send them into the chat below. Have we gotten any questions, Xavier?
Yeah, we have gotten quite a few over the last 20 or so minutes since the beginning of the stream. Keep in mind, just so we can get the stars to VR, of course, entering those last 20 minutes. If you do have any questions or comments, just simply tag us at 413. That will highlight our name in orange, and we will be able to see your questions easier. The most recent one was from one Psychta, and they were asking if it is possible the cone will shift. That is obviously going to be a yes. Cones always shift with every advisory. Of course, those advisories come out 4 times a day, at least the cone shifts, unless there's some kind of special update that requires a new one. And those times are 5 p.m. Eastern, 5 a.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Eastern, and then 5 p.m. and then 11 p.m. Eastern. So 5 and 11 of both AM and PM.
It should also be an important takeaway here to not focus directly on the cone itself.
Yes.
It's to make sure that you're staying aware with the storm. If you're in the United States right now, I would say anywhere along at least the eastern half of the Gulf Coast, and I would say at least the southeastern half of the East Coast of the United States, I would say be prepared for at least minimal hurricane impacts. I'm not saying evacuate, because we don't know if it's going to hit you, but at least be prepared. Check your emergency kits. Get your prescription medications now. Get fuel in your car before demand starts going up like crazy. You don't want to start running into price gouging and stuff. The earlier you prepare for this stuff, the better. And this is about the perfect time that you can really get your plan of action to get going here. So, the cone is absolutely subject to change. Don't pay attention on it directly. It's not meant to be taken by gospel.
Alright, we've just also received a giant onslaught of questions in the chat, so we're going to try to get through those one at a time. Alright. Cool Creeper Ryan asked, what might Dmax do for Elsa?
Well,
it's a complicated situation. It really is.
Today, during the diurnal minimum, or D-min, which happens right before sunset, the storm fired convection, and normally
Yeah.
that's when
It's
convection
this
is waning a bit. So Dmax, I think that a bit more convection could try to fire up, especially on the northwest side where the dry air intrusion is right now.
I think that the storm is developed to to the fact, where it's almost got a completely closed center, and well, it does have a completely closed center at this point, since it's a tropical storm. It's just moving so fast that it doesn't quite seem that it does. But this storm has definitely developed to the point once you start getting into 50, 60 miles an hour, the storm usually starts to not care about that stuff. That's mainly for weaker systems that are trying to fire convection, like Danny when it was a naked swirl. I don't know if it's going to have too much effect on it going forward. Now, if this starts getting hit with 20 to 30 knots of shear that isn't forecasted, then yeah, that'll start coming into play. But I'm not quite sure how much that's really going to play. I wouldn't worry about that much at all.
Hmm. We've got a glorious donation. Thank you from Sebastian Weather Channel. He asks, "What do you think for Myrtle Beach and at Tallahassee?" Regarding Tallahassee,
Way too
you're
far out.
yeah, just way too far out. But just once
Way.
again, as we keep saying, just keep monitoring the storm. And I'd probably say
Yep.
also the same for Myrtle Beach as well.
Yeah, both I would say for Myrtle Beach and Tallahassee, now would be the time to prepare for at least a minimal hurricane. You don't have to put your plan of action forth, but just make sure that you have all your materials ready just in case a hurricane is going to impact your area. I like I said, I don't think that you need to it's definitely not panic time. It's far from panic time. Like I said, we got an error of almost 800 miles right now at day 5. We really don't know what this storm's going to do, especially considering there's a giant roadblock halfway down the road. So just continue monitoring the storm. Make sure that you're prepared for potential impacts.
North
Now,
America.
Kevin, this question is directed to pretty much directly at you. CDPS rating for the storm.
Yeah, so I just went through and did a bunch of the cyclone destruction potential scale ratings. Let me find them again. So for the Lesser Antilles, which it's about to go through, it doesn't look like that the rain threat is going to be too significant. And this is expected to remain a small system, so we're not expecting the size factor to come in too much in play. And since the National Hurricane Center is holding it at 50 knots, I assume due to extreme uncertainty in that, I would not want to be a person trying to forecast the winds of this storm. Not at all. That seems awful. But the National Hurricane Center keeping it at 50 knots throughout the entire forecast period, just out of sheer, we don't know what's going on. So the wind threat's going to remain low for now. But we've got a stage 2 for the Lesser Antilles, stage 2 also for Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. They're in a 3-day cone, so I got to do them. Stage 3 for Cuba and Hispaniola, because if a direct landfall ends up happening on either of those islands, we'll probably be looking at about 20 inches of rain. So, significant significant rain threat rather is absolutely in order for Cuba and Hispaniola if a direct impact is going to happen. It doesn't look like the same can be said for Jamaica or the Cayman Islands or the Lesser Antilles, at least for now, at least from what I was able to see.
We've got a few people asking, will this be a Category 2 on the Saffir-Simpson scale?
Oh, there's there we can't I don't think it can be ruled out, but like I said, the National Hurricane Center is keeping the storm at 50 knots throughout the entire thing, which is 60 miles an hour, basically out of sheer uncertainty, out of how strong the storm can be. Because one, you've got the storm moving extremely fast. If it slows down, it can definitely form up really quickly and become a hurricane. If it doesn't slow down, keep its force pace going, then it's going to have to deal with the wheel of Hispaniola. if it's able to pass through that, then yeah, it could definitely become a hurricane and intensify further from that. In the little channel there between Hispaniola, Cuba, and Jamaica, storms typically actually like to intensify there, given the conditions are right. Um, but if this thing gets swallowed by Hispaniola, it's probably not going to be a hurricane at all. So incredible uncertainty is basically what we're trying to portray with this storm right now. Could it be a Cat 2? I don't want to say no, but it's certainly not a yes at this point.
Thank you for the newest $2 donation, Sebastian Weather Channel. Well, 2 donations of $2. You just asked a question asking for the potential for Louisiana, and as we basically said for every other U.S. state, it's still a giant wild card. It is still not something we can predict. Just like Devin said, you might want to get your plans ready, know what you're going to be doing, at least have some kind of preparedness. Doesn't mean you got to put your action plan forth yet. It just means that you just got to be closely monitoring the system because, of course, like Devin mentioned several times, this is an 800-mile spread of where the center of Elsa could go. We're talking about the center. We all know that impacts occur outside of that center, so we are really talking about a widespread area that could be seeing impacts from Elsa. We just cannot confine where at this time. We're really hoping that in future, because I'm pretty sure this is going to be the first of several live tropical weather bulletins we'll be doing for the remainder of this week and weekend. So we will keep you updated, of course. Of course, we already have storm updates that will be coming off shortly after this stream. And really, we're just waiting to see what happens with the roadblocks in the middle, so that way we can get a better grasp as to what will happen with Elsa.
We did these were separate questions, but I suppose we can just combine them into one. Can we rule out a hurricane impact to the Windward Islands? No, we cannot.
Nope.
And can impacts in the Turks and Caicos Islands potentially be ruled out?
No.
No, neither.
No to neither of those. Again, if this storm is able to slow down a little bit, consolidate its core, it could definitely be a hurricane before entering the Caribbean. Let's hope it doesn't do that. But it's something that can't be ruled out. But again, what really has to happen in order for that to occur is the storm's got to slow down. It's moving way too fast at its current state. But it could very well, if it's able to take 10 miles an hour off its forward speed, it could consolidate into a hurricane. Turks and Caicos Islands, you guys could feel effects if this storm ends up impacting Hispaniola and the storm pretty much moves north. Yeah, you guys could feel effects from it. But again, I would not take your eyes off this storm if you're in the Turks and Caicos.
I would say even the Turks and Caicos, even on the current track that Elsa is forecasted to take, you could get some of the outer bands on the northern end of it because
We'll see about that. It's expected to be a pretty small storm, so we'll see.
true, but it is to the north of the
Hispaniola.
track, and that track is still relatively fast at that point.
Yes. So yeah, you can't rule out Turks and Caicos at this time. I don't think that there will be significant impacts in Turks and Caicos like there could be in Hispaniola or Cuba, but it's definitely not something you can ignore.
Now, Devin, just a personal question from me. Now we've had this convective burst near and I believe north of the center of Elsa right now. What do you think that this convective burst could happen in the near term in terms of potential for Elsa? Do you think it might be a hurricane, or do you think that this convective burst will dissipate?
Oh, well, gradual strengthening is most likely going to be the name of the game as the storm continues to race off to the west. You don't really see rapid consolidation of storms when they're moving this quickly. So I don't think that'll strengthen much. It's not going to blow up into a hurricane overnight unless it really significantly slows down. Gradual strengthening is likely going to be the name of the game. It could probably get, if we see 45 knots this time around, here for 3Z, we could probably see 50 knots at 9Z. You know, it's just like 5-knot increments. I wouldn't expect anything more than that, though.
So another question for you, Devin. The ATCF has just ran with 50 miles per hour, 1,003 millibars, though our
Sounds about right.
fix from 0Z ran with 45 miles an hour, 1,004 millibars. Do you think that you'll be increasing to that 50 mile per hour estimate,
Well,
perhaps?
as long as once I get the data from KNMI, that confirms the 45-knot wind barbs, I will definitely be putting the storm up to 45 knots for the 3C intermediate fix that we do.
And of course, if you want to figure out what we have at the latest at all points of time, you can join our public Discord server, discord.gg/force13. We have multiple chat rooms where you can discuss the latest on the tropics, and of course, on those channel descriptions, we always have what we have, always the latest analysis on these storms. So if you do wish to join, you can follow that link that is on the bottom of your screen. The newest question that we got, or one of the questions that people have been asking, is what we think of that wave behind 90, Elsa in general. I really don't think that there's really much potential for it. If you looked at the beginning of the Tropical Weather Bulletin, it was given a 10% chance of development. There is really not much in terms of model signature on that wave, due to the fact that it will not be in the right environmental conditions for it to develop. It's also got a really low latitude system as well. It's much more low latitude than Elsa is currently, and we all know Elsa is pretty low latitude for July, and so very early July at the very least. So I really don't think that's going to be developing. 10% chance is 1 out of 10, so 9 out of 10 that it does not develop.
It should be noted though that the model support is definitely not 0.
Yes. I know there's
yeah, there's I would say 20-25% of the GFS ensembles form it, and it's even lower latitude than this storm. Like they basically be forming it over Trinidad, which is kind of insane.
Indeed.
But yeah, that does have a non-zero chance of formation. I don't think it's gonna do anything, but we'll see.
I agree. Whenever I had the water vapor imagery up at the beginning of the stream, all of that dry air that's currently kind of in the way of Elsa, that's going to be pushed behind Elsa by the high pressure system, and that's going to go towards the east. And then the high pressure system is going to go down a bit, which will also cause that dry air to follow that, and as well as like outflow and stuff from the storm. All of that dry air is going to go into the direction of this tropical wave. And eventually, I think that the wave will ingest all of the dry air and eventually just kill itself like that.
We've been asked a few times in the chat, when do we think Fred will happen? Well, that remains to be seen for right now.
Find out.
I guess, yeah. It's probably going to be some point this month, knowing how the Atlantic hurricane season has been. I don't think we will beat Faye's record, given the fact that besides that 10%... of the rumblings with that wave behind Elsa, there really hasn't been much in terms of signatures behind it. So,
I don't know
not much right
There's
now.
the-
Not much right now.
No, there's actually another wave behind that has a non-zero formation chance within 5 days. So
I'm
they're
hoping
still-
it's not.
They're coming.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of crazy right now that we're seeing this kind of activity in the Atlantic in July, but
There's been one theme of the 2021 season so far. It's pretty much just been
horrible.
shock. I mean, we've had odd systems. We had Ana, which became the easternmost cyclone in May. We had Bill that was, strengthening at over 40 degrees north latitude, and even had a partial eye wall on microwave. We had Claudette, which I really just have to say is self-explanatory, weird on itself. Danny was the first tropical storm landfall in South Carolina in June since 1867, and now of course we've got Elsa, which isn't exactly a normal system for this early in July either. So And of course, those tropical waves, we've seen a lot of those, a lot of strong ones that have been pushing out. Not something that we've seen this many in early seasons before. So it's been a very interesting year to say, at the very least, and I don't think it's gonna let us down anytime soon.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the ensembles, man. The waves keep coming. Like, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, we can pretty much just cross our fingers and hope that all these waves just die to dry air like they should. But man, it's gonna be a while before I could say one of these come off of Africa and says, you know what, there's a 0% chance of that forming.
We're just getting a question here. This is an interesting question. Will Elsa be a tornado threat? If anything, I'd say Elsa's tornado threat would most likely be later down the line, potentially for the U.S., and even that is uncertain. So we can't really say anything about the tornado threat regarding the system
Can't.
for
Yeah.
now until we get a more clearer picture right now.
Yeah, that entirely depends on how strong of a jet stream it interacts with on landfall, and that is complete Calvin ball at this point because we have no idea where it's going to make landfall. It could make landfall anywhere from Corpus Christi all the way to Wilmington, North Carolina. So we can't. I don't even know where to even begin with that question. What I can tell you is that tropical cyclones typically are a tornado threat at U.S. landfall. So there will be a tornado threat to some degree. How large of a
If it
tornado
makes it
threat
to the
it's going to
U.S.
be, though, if it hits the U.S., which we don't even know if it's going to do that. Um, yeah, we just can't. There's no way we can pin that out, especially when we're talking more than likely if it does make landfall, it won't be for 7 days. There's just no way to effectively tell. Like, we can't even get tornado outbreaks 3 days out. We can't even predict them right 3 days out. So, no
Well,
way that we'd be able to predict this one out 7.
but we're getting towards the last 2 minutes, and of course, a large thank you to our team. I'm going to try to wrap this up so that way the 2015 North Indian Ocean animation can premiere, and you guys can go to that. Of course, that was made by our very own Ethan, so stay tuned for
Go watch
that.
it.
Alright, we're going to move on to the On This Day portion of this segment. On this day, July 2nd, 1981, we had Typhoon Kelly that was in the South China Sea. It would later go on to pretty much go further inland, while Lin was a tropical storm that would later go on to hit the Philippines just days after Kelly did. So a dual Philippine threat going on in the Western Pacific on this day in 1981, as well as Hurricane Beatrice in the Pacific that was starting to weaken from its initial peak of 85 miles an hour. That was, of course, what happened 30 years ago today at this point, so no storms in the Atlantic, which is odd because we've, of course, been dealing with an active season so far. Well, with that, for the next 2 names in the Atlantic, we've already gone through 5. The next 2 names are now Fred, followed by Grace. In the Eastern Pacific, the next name is Felicia, followed by Guillermo. And in the Central Pacific, well, I really don't even need to be clarifying this anymore. You all know what it is. You can say it in the chat all you like. It's Hone.
Hone.
Hone. In the Western Pacific, the next 2 names there are Infa, followed by Simpaka. And the North Indian Ocean, we're looking for Gulab, followed by Shaheen. In the Southern Hemisphere, it's the second day that we have those new Southwest Indian Ocean names. The next 2 names there are Anna, followed by Batsire. In the Australian region, we're looking for Patty, followed by Ruby. And in the South Pacific, it's Cody. We'll be back for another live Tropical Weather Bulletin tomorrow.